Think about how many bad gimmicks we've seen over the years, then stop and realize that means there's even worse ones that were pitched but never made it out of the writing room. That just stands to reason, and it's almost fascinating to think what crazy things have fallen out of people's brains. This was the same group of people who thought Frosty McFreeze would be a good name for Stone Cold. By this token though, there's a bunch of brilliant ideas that also died before they made it in front of a camera, and that sucks, especially when it comes to wrestlers who needed something amazing to stoke the fires. I guess you never know how anything will play out, but not even trying is worse than failing. What if it became the best thing we'd ever seen? I mean, that's obviously Rusev, but it could have been a solid number 2, and there ain't nothing wrong with that. With all this in mind, let's get excited and then sad as we run through some of these and question why they didn't get further than they did. I'm Simon from WhatCulture, and this is 10 abandoned wrestling gimmicks that would have been awesome. Number 10, Dan Severn in the Ministry of Darkness. The man with one of the most underrated themes in the WWE, Dan Severn was an interesting beast, which makes sense as that was also his nickname. Well, just the Beast. He wasn't the interesting beast. Not sure that would have struck fear into his UFC opponents, but still. Brought in by Vince McMahon to try and make his product more realistic, Severn started off with a feud against Ken Shamrock because of course, and tangled with Owen Hart. I wouldn't call these classics, but they were different and that helped a lot. The real issue was that WWE never really developed a character for Dan other than he's a fighter. That wouldn't have been great anyway, but it was even worse given he was around during the Attitude Era when everybody had a gimmick of some sorts. The company realized this eventually, which means the obvious choice was to put him with The Undertaker and in the Ministry of Darkness. Right, that idea would have seen him put the number 666 on his forehead as he just followed the dead man around. It probably would have been okay given WWE did the same with 2 other tough guys, that being the Acolytes, but Severn didn't care. This was too much for him and he was worried about being disowned in his hometown. I kinda get it. The faction was controversial at best. Number 9, Severn. Even though Dustin Runnels wasn't a big fan of the character he was asked to play in WCW, it at the very least had some potential. I can understand where the former Goldust was coming from. This was an era where Vince Russo was pulling the strings and he'd gone so off the rails you couldn't trust anything going anywhere tasteful. However, while Severn was pretty sinister and pretty dark, if it had gone more in the direction of say an Undertaker, things may have been okay. Reportedly based off a group of mysterious characters in the movie Dark City known as the Strangers, Severn had mind powers that could allow him to change people's personalities and replace their memories. It's out there, sure, but there are far wackier characters in wrestling. Even the build-up vignettes were nuts as we saw him standing outside of a child's bedroom and touching hands with the boy through a window, beckoning him to come to me and live forever. The boy then turned to the camera and revealed black diamond eyes. Sheesh. Unfortunately, Turner Standards and Practices thought it just looked like a child abductor, which it kinda did, and the plug was pulled. Probably for the best all things considered. I worry what this would have ended up like. Number 8, JTG Split Personality. Despite the racist undertones which WWE should have just left be, Crime Time always managed to be entertaining. They were a decent tag team who embraced whatever they were given and they got over, deservedly so. If JTG had had his way though, he would have gone far further with this. While participating in promo classes with Vince McMahon that sometimes happened before the show with other wrestlers, JTG was called on to give a promo based on a random word. He ended up doing this while pretending he had a split personality, talking to himself as much as he was the camera. Vince loved the idea, and they began developing the gimmick a little bit more. The character soon became known as Self, and JTG thought that getting some kind of Muppet that looked exactly like him would be the icing on the cake. It would be the vessel for his other personality. He also wanted to toy with the concept by creating a world where only he and fans could see the doll, while other wrestlers would act like they couldn't. That is a little bit Ultimate Warrior in the mirror, but whatever, it's worth a go. Or not, as McMahon decided. As soon as the puppet was mentioned, Vince soured on the whole thing and it never made it to TV. We did see R-Truth talking to Lil Jimmy eventually, mind, and you can decide how that ties in. Number 7, Alois Sir. Alois Sir was 6'9". That's a tick straight away because of that height few people are more intimidating, especially during the 3rd season of NXT, which is where we first saw her. Or we would have done if it wasn't for some backstage shenanigans, which possibly could have been the leak of some racy photos online, because she was let go before the show even got going. It was explained away as a row with trainer Vicky Guerrero, but there was unfinished business here. The real-life Lindsay Kay Hayward, who was also built like a tank and could leg press 700 pounds, easily had the most unique look of any wrestler from the last decade. She had the ability to become the next Chyna, or perhaps even bigger, all things considered. On the indie circuit, she was known as Isis the Amazon, and was so big she spent most of her time wrestling men. And sure, she needed some work, but that's what NXT was for. Could have got her ready for the main roster, where a lengthy reign may have followed. Imagine her versus Karma. Could have bought into that for days. It wasn't meant to be, however, and it does suck. Seemed like she was made for this. Number 6, Karma. We did just mention her, and she fits in well with this list, so let's go all in. When Kia Stevens debuted as Karma, it seemed like she was tailor-made for WWE. Doesn't that sound familiar? A unique look and powerhouse, she'd already proven herself as Awesome Kong in TNA, so it wasn't like she was coming in from the cold. Throw in some wonderfully bizarre vignettes showing her dismembering Barbie dolls and cackling maniacally, and fans were ready for this. She was everything the Diva division wasn't. Basically, the audience wanted to see a more physically imposing female on the roster, and Karma was that. If we couldn't do it with Alois Sir, we could do it here, and then it all came to a stop. Due to various life circumstances, Karma never got much further than her debut. She made a few random appearances attacking various women before she fell pregnant. That's awesome, of course, but I would guess from a wrestling push standpoint it's always going to be a bit of an obstacle. The real shame was when she returned a year later as a surprise entrant in the Royal Rumble, because she wasn't given a damn thing. For some reason, WWE had soured on her, and before long she left the company before doing anything meaningful. This one really could have been more, and probably still could, to be honest. Number 5, Mr. Kennedy McMahon. At one point in time, Ken Kennedy looked like he was going to tear through the WWE. He was popular, over, and had a catchphrase that fans accepted, plus he was no slouch in the ring. A new star was surely on the horizon, and it was Kennedy. It went so well at first that back in 2007 this was going to be the narrative. After Vince McMahon had met his untimely demise, and we all remember that, it was going to transpire that it was his wife Linda who was responsible, which left ownership of the whole company in the hands of Mr. Kennedy, who would turn out to be Vince's illegitimate son. People say wrestling is nothing more than a soap opera. In this version, that would have obviously cemented Kennedy as a top heel, as he granted himself title shots and likely dodged any difficult opponents because he was in charge. WWE even wanted him to feud with Triple H and Stephanie McMahon before winning the WWE title and then bringing his father back to the promotion, who had faked his whole death. Now, yes, that's quite the tale, and I guess it wouldn't be a smooth ride, but it would have been 100% better than Hornswoggle, and that's what we got instead. It was awful, and in hindsight, even a balloon would have been better. Balloon. Vince McMahon's fake son. Number 4, Owen Hart as the Game. What happened to Owen Hart will always be awful. It's been 20 years and it's still hard to process, and it's made worse given that his last gimmick was being asked to run around in a mask and play the fool as the Blue Blazer. Owen was better than that. That's not to say it was horrible or that Hart wasn't brilliant at it. He was, and few wrestlers have been as funny as he was. But it was just not a fitting way to go out, especially as there were other plans supposedly on the table. If the events at Over the Edge hadn't have happened, Hart was going to be allowed to show off his more intense side that would have both helped him in the ring and on the mic. Owen was going to transform himself into the Game, and yes, you heard that right. The same gimmick that saw Triple H boost himself out of the mid-card, Hart was going to pitch himself as the best thing wrestling had ever seen, and that he knew the business inside and out. He was untouchable because he wasn't just the best in the game, he was the damn game. That line is still good. We've no idea what would have happened from there or what path Hunter would have taken, and we never will. That's the main reason all of this is so hard, the what-ifs. Number 3, Raven's 7 Deadly Sins. The Alliance invasion took out a lot of good wrestlers. The whole thing was so botched and awash with talent that a lot of people were just tagged as part of the group as opposed to having the opportunity to stand out. Raven was one of these who soon found himself as an ex-WCW star whose main job was to lose to WWE regulars. In 2001, he even lost the match which stipulated he was banished from Raw, and as a result, spent the majority of his time hanging out on Sunday Night Heat. In desperate need of a rebranding, Raven suggested using the 7 Deadly Sins motif. Essentially, he would hunt down the WWE roster and make any sinners pay. It would have started small with non-feud matches as he called out guys for their gluttony or sloth before kicking their ass in the ring. The swerve would come when he lost an I Quit match to a mid-carder, showing throughout that he was the victim to his own pride, and then he would vanish. The angle was then going to ramp up again with vengeance in a feud with Matt Hardy, where Raven videotaped himself going to a seedy hotel with a woman who was Hardy's girlfriend Lita. That's called lust. The broad idea was to have Lita leave leave Matt for Raven, who had now become the Envious. It's unclear how long the 7 Deadly Sins gimmick would have lasted after that, although Raven said he wanted to draw the whole thing out for about 6 months. That was too long for WWE, and given what happened with Edge a few years later, maybe it was good this didn't go anywhere after all. Number 2, Vader Hansen. WWE needed a new opponent for The Undertaker. They'd exhausted their options, so Michael Hayes decided to offer up something from left field. Let's bring up a developmental talent and put them in their first feud with the Dead Man, elevating them instantly. It was agreed, and the chosen one was Vader Hansen. It kicked off with some mysterious vignettes on SmackDown as a figure talked about punishing The Undertaker with righteousness and purity and threatening to take his immortal power as he released his prophecy. Usual WWE magic speak. Hansen wasn't going to come alone either, as the likes of Kevin Thorne and masked wrestler Black Pain would be backing him up. I mean, what better way to up the threat by making it clear a whole group was coming after the Phenom, who could also throw the Ministry of Darkness back at them. Sounds like a decent plan to me, and one that could tick away for a while. The issue was the idea got too much weight. When Vince McMahon examined the whole pitch, he decided Hayes was out of his mind and promptly ditched it at the last minute. It killed any hope of Hansen having success in the WWE, and it was most definitely unfair. Number 1, the Devil's Advocate. I always liked Sean O'Haire, and I don't know why. His tag team with Chuck Palumbo had something to it, so when he was brought across after WCW folded, I thought he could be somebody in the WWE, and that almost happened. Despite reforming this team for a little while, eventually O'Haire was sent down to OVW to up his game. When he returned, he had a new Devil's Advocate gimmick. Revealed in a series of videos that showed off some long hair, a goatee, and a sweet duster jacket, O'Haire began prompting the audience, along with his fellow WWE superstars, to do all the things society had deemed immoral or taboo. Adultery will make your relationship stronger, he told us, because you'll appreciate your wife more. Taxation is a scam and you shouldn't bother because the IRS doesn't have time to go after a little guy like you. And as for drugs, sometimes you just need to take a step back from reality, so tip one back and light it up. He also persuaded Spanky to streak and Dawn Marie to flash the crowd, and as nuts as it all sounds, with the right touch it could have worked. We probably could have dialed it back a bit. I'm not sure streaking was a long-term option, but it felt different for the right reasons. The problem came in the fact that McMahon just didn't find the thing all that appealing. Made no sense to him, so O'Haire was stripped of all of this and paired with Roddy Piper for some reason. When Roddy got released, Sean went back to doing nothing. Makes all the sense in the world. Know of any other abandoned wrestling gimmicks that would have been awesome? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Then head over to WhatCulture.com and read yourself some articles, and follow WhatCulture on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. My name is Simon from WhatCulture, and I will talk to you again soon.